Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media, where we decode the Trump tweets. Thomas, today we have some that are coming from July 10th and into the 11th. Let's start on the one about Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. Trump reports, I'm on Air Force One flying to NATO, and here reports that the FBI lovers, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, are getting cold feet on testifying about the rigged witch hunt, headed by 13 angry Democrats and people that worked for Obama for 8 years. Total disgrace.
Now, Betsy, welcome, and I feel very honored to get to attempt to decode these Trump tweets, as I've always said. And the first one that you're saying here, before you go off, I'm going to go ahead and antidote what you're going to go off on. He always refers to the lovers because they redacted all personal remarks. If the personal remarks had been left in the 55,000 text messages along with the attachments and the redacted names and the SES members, then we would have the whole truth. We don't have the truth. That's what he's making fun of. So when he says the lovers, they wanted, remember, Peter Strzok went behind closed doors with his congressional testimony, and what did he do? He defended himself, and basically, paraphrasing it, he said, "Get out of my business, man. Hey, I can have sex with whoever I want. So what that I'm married? Oh yes, my security clearance had been taken away from me even when I was working on these cases against Trump because I had failed my own lie detector test, which anyone who's ever got a top secret security clearance understands what that means. You fail the lie detector test, you usually they immediately remove your clearance and you have to stop everything you're doing and have access to nothing until you can clear that up. Sometimes you go to jail immediately from failing the lie detector test. What happens with him? He goes behind closed doors and basically grumbles and yells and defends himself completely for what he did. Those were government texts. That was property of the United States government. Everything they put on those government phones, those government lines, those secure lines, most of which have been hidden, lost, or obfuscated by Michael Horowitz and his stupid Inspector General fake investigation. So what's going to happen? They're going to go before Peter. The lovers are going to come together, and as Trump says, they're going to have cold feet. Oh yeah. They're going to try to get out of going, and they're going to plead the fifth the whole time because everything they did would indicate that they need to go to jail immediately. It is a total disgrace. And remember, why does he keep connecting the rigged witch hunt with the lovers? They were part of it. They had to be kicked off the special counsel. They continued the Crossfire Hurricane into the special counsel. It's the same thing.
Well, I still say, until I personally see all of these texts, I don't say they're lovers. I want to see some lovey-dovey stuff going on because what they're really hiding, Thomas, are the assassination attempts against POTUS.
Which are insinuated in even the texts that they released.
Yes, and I think that the ones that, if they would be uncovered, will show us even more of a plan. Maybe that's what their insurance policy was.
And the other agents basically state that they're going to get boards and nails to do something. Do something with boards and nails with Trump. I guess that's a coffin, and they're going to carry their second gun that they throw away, which is it's a phrase that they use to kill people.
You know, when Lisa does eventually go to jail, she's going to be separated from her children.
She's SES. Do they go to jail?
Oh, Senior Executive Service? Well, speaking of Senior Executive Service, as we uncovered in our explosive audio yesterday, which has a lot of people out there very upset with us, because we have found that he is, and his wife, Senior Executive Service operatives. And that's what Trump tweets, informing the Republican senators of my nomination of Judge Brett Kavanaugh. Of course, he didn't point out that they're Senior Executive Service. We decoders found that out.
We don't really know what Trump is doing. And so we speculated in that audio along with...
Yeah, but he's Senior Executive Service and he's been hanging around all these globalists. You can't tell me that we can't find a decent judge in the United States and that we have to have another swamp rat there at the Supreme Court.
He's a paid political warfare lawfare and warfare and a weaponized lawyer of the deep, 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 deep swamp. He has defended Clinton. He has defended Baby Bush. He is complicit with 911 because he was right there. He knew all about it. He was on the inside. His wife was a direct secretary to the President Bush in 2004, or we don't know exactly when all of that started, but it's very, very, very deep. So what is Kavanaugh? We don't know. But I believe that Trump is going to use Kavanaugh like he's been able to use other horrible deep state people for his purposes. I don't know his purposes. We speculated on it. We could speculate some more, but let's just say we're going to have to wait and see, because something's wrong with all of this.
Part of it was
he's deep state. He is shadow government. He's SES. He's the swamp.
Okay. And for those that are interested in learning more of what we say, I do have that video clip in the link that's in the description box under the YouTube video. Okay, so enough said about him. Next tweet. Many countries in NATO, which we are expected to defend, are not only short of their current commitment of 2%, which is low, but are also delinquent for many years in payment that have not been made. Will they reimburse the U.S.?
As we said before, every time he goes abroad to any country, he already sends the pre-message, the pre-deal. And if they don't get on board, they're not getting the real deal. Okay, so he did that to the G7. They tried to fight him with tweets. They lost. They've completely lost. And their attempts to put tariffs on us just mean we could put more tariffs on them. It's stupid. We have all the chips. We can't lose. So what he's saying here is he's going over there and he's already tweeting his first negotiation points. He tweeted out what they better come to the first table with in the first meeting, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, which is absolutely hysterical. But what he's repeating, don't give me no nonsense about 2%. You're going to pay 4% or NATO is not going to exist anymore.
Why is it so low? Why is the United States having to constantly shell out money for these
bad executive deals? And it's because we've had bad executives. We've had bad presidents, really, really evil presidents who were doing things that had nothing to do with supporting we the people. So it's all going up to 4%, or he's just going to drop NATO. We told you he's going to drop NATO, just like he's been dropping all the components of the United Nations one at a time, piece by piece, until it will no longer exist. So he's basically now calling them out so that their pants are down. He waited in the G7 to pull their pants down till they got there. He's pulling their pants down before he gets there with the European Union. And what he's saying is very, very, very clear. You're liars. You're cheaters, you owe us money, and we pay you $151 billion a year. It ain't happening. It ain't happening. And it says, will they reimburse the United States? Strike the word will and strike the question mark. They will reimburse the United States, period. Why? Because he's going to simply use these as bargaining chips. These people are stupid, but they are getting smarter. And when we get to one of these tweets about what happened at that first breakfast meeting, we'll see that they have awakened. And they are woke. And they sent different people to that breakfast meeting than came to the G7. Why? Because the tweets have already taken down Angela Merkel. The tariffs in Germany, the most important things, are on luxury cars. And so he's already broken her back on that. But that's not what he's breaking her back about now. Now he's going to really break her back.
Well,
and we're going to go to that in a minute. But the point is these tweets are his pre-deals. And if you don't get on board with the tweets, and if you want to have a negative attitude, and if you want to try to stand against what he's saying, because there is no arguing with this, you're going to lose even bigger. NATO will simply be dissolved.
The next tweet, a recent Emerson College e-poll said that most Americans, especially Hispanics, feel they are better off under President Trump than they were under President Obama. Well, weren't we all?
Now, what is hidden in between the lines there is the following. Especially Hispanics. What does that mean? That means illegal aliens. That means, upwards to 20 million illegal aliens. And basically what he's saying is even they believe that he's the first president that's going to give them a reasonable chance of sensible immigration, a path to immigration even for those who have done the right thing once they got here. He was willing to consider that with DACA. So what he's saying here is I am, and the Republican Party is, really the group that Hispanics should support. And that is in counterbalance to the war that was declared by the new president of Mexico, Oduro, who in his statements, he has declared war upon America. He's declared that the border doesn't exist and that Mexicans have a civil right to come into America and illegally rip us off with taxes, with paying money, and take that money and move it out of America into Mexico. He said that was a civil right, and that would be one of the major things he's going to work on, and complete amnesty for all cartel members. So the tens of thousands of people murdered by the cartel members at our border now have amnesty from a rogue, insane, headed towards Venezuelan-type socialist Marxist fascism on our border. And you don't want to give him a wall? In a minute, I'm going to tell you that he just got given $266 billion that is not in anybody's budget, and he should be able to take 10% of that to build that wall he wants, $26 billion, because that's the only sensible thing, folks. War has been declared against America, and it is Mexico who has declared it.
The next tweet is, the European Union makes it impossible for our farmers and workers and companies to do business in Europe. U.S. has a $151 billion trade deficit, and then they want us to happily defend them through NATO and nicely pay for it. It just doesn't work.
Oops, just doesn't work refers to NATO. There may be a period between them, but there isn't in the concept. What I'm telling you, he is very clear here, but he's nice. He's not mean like me. He's basically saying, you're screwing us. Do you think I don't notice? And do you think I'm going to let it continue? And do you think I'm going to let you put it out in one of your lovely plans where you come against America as a pack of wolves and then you say, oh, we're going to pay by 2030. Oh, we're going to pay by 2025. Oh, don't you worry. We're going to pay in increments. This year, we're not paying anything. Remember, the Climate Accord, no one except America was going to pay in the first year. $400 billion or $500 billion, I think it was. And over time, it was a $5 trillion gut of America. And the European Union wasn't paying anything to begin with. That's the way their deals work. So he's saying no more of those deals. And the $151 billion, I have the chips, folks. I have the trade deficit. You have the surplus. We give it to you. I do deals. I am the president of the United States of America.
He also collects rent.
Yes. He's collecting rent on the NATO equipment that we have in all of these countries. But they're not paying the rent. So the landlord has come calling, and he's got an eviction notice. And the eviction notice is to NATO. And NATO is a terrible, horrible organization that is nothing but a propaganda machine to go against Russia. And it should be closed, period.
Just for a moment, speak about the relationship to NATO and all of this propaganda. The Ukrainian Council and that relationship.
The Atlantic Council is the propaganda arm of NATO. It is funded by George Soros. It's funded by Carnegie and the Rockefellers. And it is nothing more than a political machine to keep the Cold War going, because in Henry Kissinger's direction of the Council on Foreign Relations, it all hinges upon the clash of nations. And world dominance is controlled by having all nations below the dominant nation, in other words, America, the superpower, must be in a clash at all times. There must be war. This is what the Bushes built America upon. The continued, what they call the slow war against terrorism, which they say will never end and cannot be won. So we are always in a state of war.
And that way they can always sell their weapons and their airplanes and the military men out there in uniform and all equipped. I mean, this is just really creating your own customer for the military-industrial complex.
Yes, and please tell me that people remember that in World War I and II, Russia was on our side. I hope people remember we've never been at war with Russia. That the whole Cold War was complete nonsense. Yes, Russia's incursion into Europe, well, they were taking everything they could. Look at what they lost in World War II. So, yes, and then when we attacked the USSR through economic terrorism and destroyed it, and then that we attacked the satellite countries, and then we attacked Russia itself, and now we continue to attack Russia through the Obama sanctions on the Nord Stream 1 and 2, which we're going to talk about in a minute, which all this is about, by the way. There doesn't need to be NATO, and there doesn't need to be bombs on the border with Russia. What would we do, or what did we do when bombs are being shipped to Cuba? Mexico is now saying, get ready, folks. I warned you of this. Maduro has said that he is going to allow discussions with Russia and China to put nuclear weapons on our southern border. Okay? That's where this is going. Does Russia want that? No. They have to play their mafia oligarchs, okay? He's an alpha male. These other beta males and beta females that are in the European Union, they are mealy-mouthed little children, and Trump, they were literally bowing before Trump economically.
Let's go to the next tweet so we can get into this bilateral breakfast that I know you're very excited to explain. Just talked with Pfizer CEO and Sek Azar on our drug pricing blueprint. Pfizer is rolling back price hikes so American patients don't pay more. We applaud Pfizer for this decision and hope other companies do the same. Great news for the American people.
But it's very bad news for the Clinton Foundation because they make untold hundreds of millions of dollars taking pharmaceutical drugs sold in America at a high price. They stand in the middle, tax them, and sell them to countries throughout the world. And then they keep most of the money themselves. So you see prices being 100 times less in Africa than they are in America. All you have to do is go across the border to Canada. 40 to 80% discount on all drugs. Why is that gouging happening? Because
our political leaders allow Americans to be financially and economically raped by the rest of the world.
Yes, and they're not being charged with the RICO charges that they should be charged. This is gouging. This is corporate corruption. This is a monopoly. These, in many cases, they have, because of the rights for these drugs and the the ability they have for 5 years to protect it themselves, right? During that time, they can raise the price to anything they want. So they lowered the prices when Trump came in. They raised the prices again, thinking Trump had become a globalist, I guess. And then he had to go after them. And what's he going after them, saying? How is it that these opiates are coming across our southern border? Don't blame it all on the Chinese. I know who's doing it. You're doing it. You're going to lower the prices now. And then they gave him pushback just a week or two ago. And now he comes out, he's going to simply mention the word RICO. And they will lower the prices. They will lower the prices 50%. They will lower the prices much more. He says, we applaud Pfizer for this decision. No. It wasn't a decision. He twisted their arm. He made them do it. They don't want to do it. Why can they discount them to other countries? Because they don't run the multi-billion-dollar commercials, which have subliminal programming in them, that tell you to go to your doctor to ask for a drug and you don't even know what the commercial is telling you the illness is. Did anybody notice that? You go to your doctor and say, doctor, do I need Nexium? I think I do. I like those commercials. I don't know what those people's illness is, but I want Nexium. Why? Subliminal programming, and it's all for political influence. So the commercials are there so that they can gouge Americans. And who supports them? Politicians. And what is the second largest amount of money they spend? Not on research and development for drugs. Commercials are the first. The second is lobbying. That money is paid directly to politicians. And that's the reason Trump is saying, I don't care the way you used to run your rat lines through Congress. I'm twisting your arm to make this decision. You will lower prices for Americans, or else I will bring RICO charges against you. He mentioned monopolies before with the Silicon Valley idiots, and their companies shook. Their stock went down. All he has to do is say he's going to go after Pfizer, and their stock went down the first time, when they had the pushback. So this one here, they had to make this decision because otherwise they were going to lose too much money.
The next two tweets are about the bilateral breakfast with NATO Secretary General in Brussels, and there is a video of it that it's included. If you want to see that video before you listen to Thomas decode it, it's in the description box at the link. So, Thomas, how was that breakfast for you?
Well, as we said the last time we decoded Trump tweets, which is an honor, because it's rather bold of us to think we can read between the lines, but since almost everything we have ever read between the lines did come to pass, I think we're pretty good at it. And it's only because Trump is an honest man, and so we can read it because he's honest. He goes to the breakfast, and he already warned them what his deal was. Before he has his coffee poured, there is an 8-minute video where the Secretary of the European Union, representing NATO, says to him, oh, don't worry, Mr. President. If he could have bowed and kissed his foot or his Pope ring, he would have. He bowed economically and said, before we pour the coffee, sir, I want to tell you, I'm giving you $266 billion in new NATO money that we have forced out of the countries that haven't been paying or weren't paying their share. And what does Trump say? He doesn't even bat an eye. He says, well, that's good, but there'll be more. And then the secretary says, sir, there is more coming. Please be patient. There's more coming. And then Trump says, look, okay, you want to play these games? You're only going to give me $266 billion? Then I'm going to right now, before we even start, tell the horrible truth. And the horrible truth is that Germany, who is in George Soros's pocket, created the Muslim radical Islamic Muslim fascist invasion of Europe. We now know that because the boats bringing them over were paid for by George Soros and Angela Merkel using tax dollars from Germany. Now, where did she get this money? Because nobody knows, I guess, until now, that Germany has been cheating on the sanctions, and Trump brought this out. And we're talking way more than hundreds of billions of dollars at this point, because let me explain. There's two pipelines that go out of Russia through into northern Germany and into northern Europe. Now, they could go to many different ports, but when the sanctions were put on Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 wasn't finished, which are the two pipelines I'm talking about, coming out of Russia, going into northern Europe, the sanctions were put on one and basically on the other one too. And so we assumed the sanctions were still on, right? And this is what's breaking the back of Russia. No. What did we tell you the other day? We told you that we don't know that those sanctions are still on now, do we? But what we do know is that Trump put other sanctions 2 or 3 times on Russia. But we didn't know whether or not he removed any of the sanctions of Obama. We told you he'd figure out a clever way to get out of these stupid sanctions that were placed on the Russians for election meddling, which there was none from the Russians, because they want our business. They really don't want to piss us off. So Nord Stream 1 was carrying half, let's just say a huge amount of the oil to Europe. And then the second pipeline was coming across Ukraine. It was coming out of Kazakhstan and joining with pipeline in Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, going through Ukraine, coming into Europe. That was closed off because of Obama sanctions. He also closed off Nord Stream 1. This just about, I can't even tell you how bad this was for the Russian people. It was, they're trying to hide how bad it is. Let me just put it that way. So what has happened? Well, Ukraine hasn't let up on not letting the oil through because they're now digging and pumping up oil as fast as they can for themselves and putting it in that same pipeline. But they're only getting up enough oil for themselves because Hunter Biden's just not good on their gas board. And what is happening is these sanctions have collapsed because Germany, behind the back of all the Europeans, obviously, has allowed these sanctions to be broken and come into northern Germany. So now Trump says, why would I defend Germany when you're getting oil from Russia? Now, what he didn't say was, you are illegally breaking the sanctions that we have against Russia because why? You're our partners. You're our NATO partners. You're our trade partners. Wait. And he said, don't mix up, and he corrected the guy, the secretary. He said, don't mix up trade and energy. Energy creates wars, people. Trade determines what color your clothes are you're wearing from Walmart. And how much we're getting screwed. Like he keeps going back to the farmers because Europe won't take our food. Why won't they take our food? Because they're taking it from our enemies. They're taking their oil from Russia. Why would we?
But you just said that Russia's not our enemy. So what enemies are you talking about?
That's
the
point.
Food from.
And what did the secretary?
You can't have it both ways. They're playing us.
Oh, they're playing us.
And Trump is over breakfast calling them out.
Totally.
We're not stupid people.
He won't even go enter the meeting. They're going. I think this is the end of Angela Merkel, unless Soros's power is more supreme than I even imagine. But the deal is Nord Stream 1 and 2, if they were both opened, would cause everything to be fine, and Ukraine would basically economically collapse. They were living off of the tax they were putting on the pipelines coming from Russia through Ukraine into Europe. They were living off of that. And as I told you before, Britain, through France, was stealing oil and going against the sanctions in Iran by taking in a hidden pipeline they had coming out of the north of Iran. And so there were all kinds of pipeline deals going on, and Trump is just calling it, no. I don't call energy trade. You must be foolish. Energy is energy. Energy drives war. And if you don't have energy, you can't have war. And NATO is based upon war. And if you don't have NATO and the Atlantic Council, which George Soros now is using the Atlantic Council's fact-checking devices and news scrubbing programs to completely stop free speech in Europe and Britain, and that was passed through the European Union with Article 13 just a few weeks ago. So that's why we didn't know about this. That's why no one in Europe knew that Angela Merkel at the same time was making a fortune bringing the oil into Germany, upping the price, and selling it. This is astounding. This is what Trump does. And when we told you that we had a very strong feeling that he was changing the sanctions on Russia, or they had been changed, they had been, and he then was putting other sanctions on, those were the evil Russians that Obama was working with. Oleg Deripaska. That's why there is now a tariff on aluminum. He's the aluminum oligarch in Russia. That's why Leonid Blavatnik, who is a fake Brit, who is actually still sits on the largest gas board in and oil in Russia, he is making out as a bandit. He, I'm sure, has sanctions on him now because they were cheating and coming through Germany. So those are the sanctions we knew he put on, because he put on all these sanctions on Russians and he didn't say who. So he already took his actions. That's the reason that that secretary at that breakfast was bowing down to him deeper than the British bow down to Queen Lizzie. That was an economic bow to the true supreme power, economic power of America that controls 87% of all currencies in the world.
Well, I know you're going to continue describing this to us, but let's wrap up with the last two tweets that are related, and I'll read them together. I am in Brussels, but always thinking about our farmers. Soybeans fell 50% from 2012 to my election. Farmers have done poorly for 15 years. Other countries' trade barriers and tariffs have been destroying their businesses. I will open things up better than ever before, but it can't go too quickly. I am fighting for a level playing field for our farmers and will win.
If you put up a trade barrier, I'm going to smash you with tariffs.
Yeah.
And I'm going to end NATO.
Yeah.
Go ahead, make your next move.
Uh-huh. The parent has finally arrived and is disrupting this party.
Yes. The disruptor, they call them, these new forces in technology that come in that change everything. Well, he is the great wrecking ball for these globalist systems. And this is, the European Union is one of the worst of the globalist systems. It is the precursor to what would have been the New World Order ran out of NATO, ran out of the United Nations. And the Cold War and warism would have continued because of the Atlantic Council and the propaganda. They say that Russia interfered in the French elections, in the German. No, they have no proof whatsoever.
However, we have proof that the United Kingdom, the Privy Council, and Queen Elizabeth, they are the ones that have been meddling in everybody's elections. And we're going to hear more about that later on, probably the next audio from Michael McKibben, who's been doing some research in that area and will be showing us the evidence, not the conspiracy theories, that they are behind the election meddling.
That is right. And also in America, but all throughout the world, and certainly with what is going on with Article 13. But these are unelected officials who are in the pocket of George Soros. They literally have counted how many there are. 217 of them have direct alliances with George Soros openly through the Open Societies Foundation, Tides Foundation, and other such things. It's like the corruption is thick as a brick.
And, if you're out there listening and saying, why is it that I only hear this on Betsy and Thomas's show? You need to ask that. Why isn't fake Fox News reporting on the election meddling from the United Kingdom? Why isn't Fox News reporting the senior executive service and this whole underground operation that's occurring within our government? Why aren't they reporting this, Thomas?
Mainstream media is nothing more than an extension of the warlord bankers and brokers who have to keep the propaganda up. They are not investigative journalists, and now they are controlled by something that the researchers from Americans for Innovation have brought forward, that literally there's a thing called AVID, or the ISIS management program, that basically creates all news. It weeds out news, and then you have the Google program, the Digital News Initiative, which is now controlling everything that comes across that is being broadcast in America. So the time of free speech is dwindling unless we stand up and defend people like Jim Jordan, like Devin Nunes, like the people who are fighting the DOJ and the FBI and the CIA.
Wrap it up.
So, what I would like to say is that we had predicted that this would happen. We didn't know what he has brought as the biggest chip. That chip just placed on the table collapsed at the table. He is calling Angela Merkel as an evil wrongdoer. And he's not going to do business with anybody that's going to support her evil wrongdoing. Did you hear that that secretary could not come up with one single correct response when Trump said, "Why should I support NATO when Angela Merkel is getting oil from Russia?" He asked it, 5-6 times? No answer. That's going to be the only point. And then no trade barriers will have to happen. That's not even under discussion. No more tariffs. That'll have to happen. That's not under discussion. And will NATO go on? Well, not as it is. You either pay up your bill and pay your whole bill, or we're pulling our troops out. And as everyone should know, our troops create tremendous income for every country they're in. It is nothing more than another tariff those countries have placed upon us. We could withdraw them all and put them where the real border is, which is on the southern border with Mexico.
I just wanted to say that I'm sure that we have many listeners who have further commentary on this subject, and we really like to see your comments below. It helps when other people drop in, and not only do they hear us talking about it, but that they read what you are writing about this situation. It makes it a more well-rounded platform for people to learn.
NATO is based upon these stupid political ideas of Henry Kissinger that nations must stand off each other with nuclear deterrence. If you have nuclear weapons, folks, you do not need soldiers on the ground. Unless you want to go to conventional war, which is just stupid, and there'd never be a reason for that I can think of, certainly not since World War II.
And if we were truly interested in getting rid of this nuclear war, we would go to thorium so that you can't build bombs off of the energy that you can when you use uranium.
Precisely. Just instituting thorium would collapse the back of what Trump made perfectly clear. Energy is not trade. Energy is war. What he's saying is, you want to connect trade? We have to connect trade to NATO because NATO's war. And I'm basically done with all of you NATO nations.